There it is, the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of the 2026 NFL Draft. Who will the Raiders select at number 1? NFL Media's Daniel Jeremiah gives his prediction. Plus, where does GM John Spytek go after that? CBS Sports' Charles Davis is talking picks 2 through 10. And Hall of Famer Kurt Warner breaks down Heisman Trophy winner Fernando Mendoza. The Raiders Draft Special starts right now. Raider Nation, you are on the clock. Welcome into Raiders Draft Special. I'm Amber Theoharis. It's been a minute since we last met, and boy, is this a different-looking Raiders team. Clint Kubiak is now the head coach. Tom Brady and John Spytek took over football ops. 8 significant free agents have been added, including All-Pro center Tyler Linderbaum and defensive vets like Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Kwity Paye. Roughly $75 million of the Raiders' $100 million in cap space has been spent. And oh, by the way, Max Crosby's back. Now we turn to the draft. Thursday night with the number 1 overall pick, the Raiders will call the name of a man they believe will change the organization for decades to come. So who will it be? Let's welcome in our first guest, NFL Media's top draft guru, Daniel Jeremiah. Daniel, clearly you're backstage. I know you're a man in transit, but good to see you, my friend.
Oh, I'm already in Pittsburgh, so I'm sitting here. I look out the hotel. I can see the stadium, the draft setup here. It's going to be a big party, and the belle of the ball is going to be wearing silver and black.
Yeah, and it's an exciting time to be a part of the Raiders, I'll tell you that. And it's shocking. I mean, I couldn't believe this when I saw your mock draft that you have this guy named Fernando Mendoza going number 1 overall. It's the first time any of us have heard that. But look, you know, teams, DJ, can't afford to whiff at number 1. It could set your organization back for many, many years. If Mendoza is indeed the Raiders' choice, what qualities do you think would make Spytek and his staff so sure that Mendoza is the answer?
Yeah, to me, I start, first of all, Amber, with just the toughness, and that's physically and mentally. You see it littered throughout all of his tape. You can see it when he was at Cal. You could see it especially this last year at Indiana. You know, whether there was a struggle early, he was able to kind of steal his will and overcome it. Whether he was getting cheap shotted, hit early in games, some vicious hits, especially in those last handful of games, and then popping right back up, dialing in and being able to, to make big time throws and big time decisions. So you start with the physical and mental toughness. Then you add to that the prototypical size. You know, he's got all the arm strength that you need there from that standpoint, and he's above the threshold as an athlete. So all those things are great. And then when you learn more about him as a kid, you find about the intangibles, the intelligence, the work ethic. The teammates really enjoyed being around him, and they respected him, maybe even more so than enjoyed it. I think they just had a healthy respect for how hard he worked. So those are the qualities. There's no such thing as a sure thing. There's no such thing as a can't miss pick. But man, you feel a lot better. You sleep a lot better when you have all those boxes checked.
Yeah, and you've seen a million quarterbacks go number 1. I think you and I have covered, a combined 2,000 drafts together. Some work, some work, many don't. If you look at the numbers, a lot of number 1 overall picks don't. There is somewhat of a blueprint, that has worked around some of these quarterbacks. Is there anything the Raiders did this offseason that successful teams do around a number 1 pick?
Yeah, I always come back to it. I've been saying this for a while, which is just the 3 Ps. You find the right play caller, you get him some protection, you add playmakers. When you do those 3 things, you get a chance. Now, that doesn't guarantee you're going to hit, but if you look at guys who weren't successful, most of them have been failed by the organization in that regard. Like there was major holes in those 3 areas. And you go out and get Kubiak, from an offensive standpoint, is as good as it gets. Not only what he did last year, but really in his DNA, like how he grew up, like, who he is. And to me, I think that's an excellent choice. That fills that bucket. Then you go out to get Linderbaum to be kind of that anchor piece of the offensive line, get Colton Miller back fully healthy. There you got some building blocks there. Now, I think this next one is going to be interesting. They've got some solid weapons. Obviously, you got arguably the best tight end in the NFL in Bowers. I like where Genti is in the backfield. I think some more firepower just to increase the playmakers part of that. I'm curious to see how they approach that in this draft.
Yeah. So what would your draft strategy be if you were in the war room, knowing the free agents they've already signed, their cap space, but what they need in this draft. Where would you start?
Yeah, there's a couple places on the defensive side of the ball you can look. Defensive tackle, I could see that with marrying up well with where they are in the second round. To me, I like the idea of just continuing to invest in the offense. Get a big wide receiver to add to the mix. If Denzel Boston from Washington were to get there in 2, maybe you could scoop up a guy like Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. Maybe he falls to the 3rd round. Would be a nice player to put in there. There's some good young players from last year's draft that they had that wide receiver spot, but I think you bring in more competition for them and just try and get some more firepower. If we're looking up and look, I think Kirk Cousins is going to get a long runway here to play and buy Fernando some time. But if we're looking up a year from now and you say, okay, let's say the Raiders got to 500 or maybe even a little over 500 in this next year, and the offense looks great, and we feel like we've got the quarterback in a good spot, but we still have some holes on defense. I think you feel great about things. I think if the opposite took place and you swing heavy on the defensive side of the ball, you have the same exact record, but you've got more question marks, at the quarterback spot, I think you wouldn't feel quite as good. So I lean, if it's close, I'm taking the offensive player.
Well, building around Mendoza, that's what we keep talking about. DJ, you come from, the scouting background. I know you started back with the Ravens under one of the greatest in Ozzie Newsome, and he always taught all of us, it started with that organization, best player available philosophy was his. Do you buy into that still? And who could be the best player available at this second pick the Raiders have, which is the top of the second, number 36?
Yeah, I do. I always laugh about it a little bit because I think that you can fudge it. So what happens is you set the board based off of your need, and then when the draft comes, you go, "We took the best available player." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but you ranked them based off of your need." So that doesn't make sense. But yeah, no, to me, I think you can't go wrong. If the players are on different levels, yeah, just take the best available player. Now you got a bunch of similar grades on them. You can lean into your need a little bit more. But the wild thing about this draft is, you're asking like, who's that going to be at the top of the second round where they are? And there's so much uncertainty with this draft. Like, teams are all over the map outside the top 12, 14 players. The grades are all over the place. So, who does that player end up being? Maybe the Raiders are pleasantly surprised and they get their, 16th player in the second round. It wouldn't shock me with the way teams are talking this year.
Yeah, a lot of talent, it feels like, could slide to the top of that second round. It feels like there's a lot of talented defensive backs available late in the first, early in the second, and the Raiders haven't had a shutdown corner. I mean, I was trying to remember, I could remember, maybe Nnamdi Asomugha was like the last one I really remember. Who could be a fit that could be available in that space?
I really like Chris Johnson, the kid from San Diego State. And it's not just a local thing, Amber. I'm not just being loyal to my San Diego roots there. Like, he is a good player. I think he got a chance. He could go in the bottom of 1, if not, early second round, but he's real strong, sturdy, he's tough. He can play the ball. The question was the recovery speed, the deep speed, but he ran 4.4 flat. So he helped alleviate some of those concerns. But a really, really good player I like there. Another one that I would throw into the mix, Traden Stukes from Arizona has caught a lot of steam here late in the process. He can play really anywhere. He can play inside at nickel. He can play as a free safety. I think he could hold up on the outside. He's a little bit older, but I think he's going to go in the second round. I think he's going to go early in the second round. And another one, he's another one who's got a chance to go in the bottom of the first round. But, they can't all go. So somebody's going to be there, where they're picking early too. Those are a couple good players.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But do you buy into the philosophy of somebody like a Omar Cooper Jr., that Mendoza threw 24 touchdowns to him? Yeah. They know each other. Have you seen similar situations where, bringing their buddy along with them works out?
Well, I think it's, I have to go back and rack my brain about places where it's worked out. I want to say, gosh, there's this quarterback named Joe Burrow and this receiver named Jamar Chase. I lost track of him. I don't know whatever happened to him, Amber. Yeah. Did that work out okay?
Yeah, I can't remember after LSU, but I think it went well. I remember them in the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it worked out. So, yeah, if you wanted to give him Omar Cooper in the second round, he's not Jamar Chase. So I don't want to get your hopes up there. I really like him. He's a really good player. And then if that's not the case, I think that Surratt is the other Indiana receiver who is the back shoulder king, which Mendoza loves to throw. You can get him, beyond that. So there's going to be opportunities. The fun thing is The hard part is finding the quarterback. It's fun. The fun part's getting to put the pieces around him.
No doubt about it. The Raiders are in a unique position. They had $100 million in cap space. Like, let's put your GM hat on here. 10 draft picks, including the #1 overall pick. That is a rare situation to be in. Does that potentially accelerate a rebuild for the Raiders, and does it feel like it has been a little bit?
I think they're a much improved team, on paper. And then you look at, with Mendoza and what the future looks like there, when he gets on the field, it'll be interesting with Kirk there. But yeah, and you mentioned it at the top. Like, we thought Max Crosby was gone. It's like found money that you somehow built up all this team. You already did all that shopping in free agency because they had so much space. They could still, didn't have to move on from Max. So if you get a healthy Max back and he's, he seems like he's very excited to be back. Man, with all the other pieces that they've added, it's going to be a fun Raider team to watch. Now, it's a division stacked. It is a loaded division. It's going to be a healthy competition. But you always felt like the Raiders, until they had the quarterback, you're going up against Mahomes and Herbert, and then the roster of the Broncos and then Bo Nix on top of that with how well he's played early in his career. It was kind of hard to see how the Raiders were going to be able to get there. Well, now you've got a guy, you got a real dude, and that accelerates this pretty quickly. So I'm excited to see him. I think they've went from I won't say an unwatchable product, but it wasn't a fun watch. And now you look up, and this is going to be a fun team to watch next year.
It's a fun week for Raider Nation. There's no doubt about it. DJ, you're so busy this week. Cannot wait to see you sitting up there with Rich Eisen and Kurt Warner and all of our buddies. Thanks so much for being here with us, and we'll be watching you over on NFL Network. Thanks.
You're the best, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. All right, coming up next, where will the most value come in the middle rounds, and where could the Raiders play into that? Trevor Sikkema is up next. The 2026 Raiders Draft Special is brought to you by Knock v. Injury Law, the official law firm of the Las Vegas Raiders, and by Karma, the official luxury electric vehicle of the Las Vegas Raiders. Welcome back to Raiders Draft Special. Up next, we have Trevor Sikkema, the co-host of NFL Stock Exchange, to give his take on who the Raiders might select. And Trevor, you know what? We've spoken. First of all, thanks for coming on. We're glad to have you. Good to meet you.
Yeah, it's great. I appreciate you having me on as well.
Well, everybody thinks that Mendoza's going #1. Okay, we all know that's out there. I want to ask you this. You're the first person I've asked this on the show. We do have to address, there is another scenario that is possible. Do you see a world where Mendoza is not taken first overall by the Raiders, rather they trade out of the pick for a haul, let somebody else take him?
I just don't think that's going to happen this year. And the reason why is because I'm not sure that the price is going to match sort of what you'd be giving up here. I mean, Mendoza, I don't think that he's just going #1 overall because he happens to be a quarterback in this class and the Raiders need one. He's a good prospect. I would take Fernando Mendoza over Cam Ward last year. So if that sort of puts it into perspective, I think that he is a really good quarterback prospect. And normally when you talk about trading out of that #1 spot, in the past, it's been, okay, multiple first-round picks, multiple second-round picks, right? A king's ransom, if you will. I'm just not so sure that the Raiders are going to get that type of a haul. So for where they are, how they set themselves up with not only the new coaching staff, but all the additions in free agency as well, it all sets up and is centered around them taking a quarterback right now. So I think the entire offseason has really been built around this move, and I just can't see a reality where they're not taking Mendoza at #1.
Yeah, I mean, people forget also, you still need a quarterback. Even if you took a king's ransom, you still can't win without a quarterback. You can push it to next year's draft. Going to be a heavy quarterback draft, yet you don't know where you're going to pick. So I agree. I would go and stick with #1 and pick it #1, but it's not my choice. There's another quarterback also that has been out there, and that's Alabama's Ty Simpson. Most regard him as the second best quarterback in this draft. There have been some conflicting reports, though, about kind of the gap in talent and experience and all that between him and Mendoza. What are your thoughts on that? Is it a closer gap or a wider gap than we think?
No, look, I like Ty Simpson. I gave him sort of right around a second to late second round grade. And anytime you talk about a quarterback, you're paying a little bit of a tax to draft that position. So you figure, all right, mid-second to late second round grade, that probably accounts to more of a late first round selection, maybe a mid first round selection, depending on the team that they're choosing. But even though I like Ty Simpson, I think Ty Simpson can win games in the NFL. I think he can be a decent starter for you, especially if you surround him with a good team. It's not really close to me. I don't think that it's close enough to where I'd be having a debate between who I would take number one overall. Mendoza is the one who, when you look at what he's able to do, the arm talent that he has, the physical ability, and because Ty Simpson, he's a little bit smaller for quarterback compared to NFL standards. Fernando Mendoza is not like that. Fernando's also got a little bit of that added mobility and that toughness to him, like we saw in the national championship game when he looks to tuck it and run. I think he's got the arm strength to be able to attack all three levels of the field and really make any throw that you want him to make. Simpson, I think, really processes the game very well, but he is a little bit smaller of a quarterback, and where I think he's got a good arm, I don't think that it's anything that's way above and beyond what Mendoza's would be. So I think overall arm talent, you lean toward Mendoza, the overall stature, you lean toward Mendoza, and then just the body of work throughout their college careers, you have to go with Mendoza as well. So with no category specifically going to Ty Simpson, it wouldn't really be much of a debate with who I would take first if I had a quarterback selection.
Let's move over to the defensive side. No doubt the Raiders needed to improve on defense from last year, and they really did that through free agency. We do know that this draft is deep in edge rushers. The Raiders already signed Kwity Paye. They brought Malcolm Kuntz back on another deal. Max Crosby's back in town. Do you still think that might be an area of focus for the Raiders, considering Rob Leonard's scheme? They're going to rush every quarterback. I mean, they're going to put a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks this year.
No, absolutely. I think that every coach wants waves of pass rushers, right? It's not just about looking at the front of the depth chart and saying, okay, we're good at our two starting spots. I mean, these are guys who are going all out every single play, whether it's run downs or pass downs. So you've got to have that rotation of edge rushers. And so I look at, obviously not number one overall, but, you talk about, the second and third round selections, guys like, does TJ Parker from Clemson make it to you? Gabe Akis, who is a little bit bigger, a little bit more powerful type of an outside linebacker. Maybe you want a little bit more speed. So Malachi Lawrence from UCF, or R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma, Kieran Crawford from Auburn. There's so many different names that you could throw out there in the second and third round range, to where I think it's a pretty nice sweet spot for them. I'd throw defensive tackle in there as well. This is a team that not only wants to focus on the edge rushers, but the interior defensive line as well. When I do my mock drafts, of course, Mendoza goes number one overall for the Raiders. But when I get to that second round, I always find myself saying, man, the defensive tackles, I like the value here. Caden McDonald from Ohio State. You're looking at Christian Miller as well from Georgia. Like, these are these run-stuffing players who can really help fortify the early downs, and something that I think was a struggle for them the previous season. So that's an area where I like that. And if they want to double dip on defensive line, I think you could then, the third of their multiple fourth-round picks that they have, you could pick up an edge rusher that, yeah, okay, the later you get in the draft, they're a little bit more specialized in exactly what they do, less all-around game. But I think this is definitely a draft where day 2 and early day 3 as well, the Raiders will have a chance to continue to fortify that defensive line.
I think that's a great point. I think people underestimate depth at defensive line and the ability to wear out offenses early and be able to rotate. So that's a great point, that you can only get deeper there. One position group that seems to be deepest is cornerback. No doubt the Raiders need depth at cornerback. They re-signed Eric Stokes in the offseason. Where do you think that they could add some depth or pull the trigger on a corner?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I like round 2, round 3 for them, because there's a bevy of different corners that you can choose from. And I think the thing with cornerbacks that you got to remember is, the good ones, the all-around ones, the ones who you go, hey, doesn't matter, man coverage, press coverage, zone coverage, bail technique, whatever. The good ones, they go in the top 15. Like, if you have the ability to check all those boxes, you're probably going to be a top 15 draft pick. When you get a little bit later, it's a little bit more specialized. You have to say, okay, well, are we a team that's going to play a lot of cover 3? Are we going to play a lot of press man? Are we going to play a lot of off-zone coverage? What does that look like? And I think there, you've got to identify the different strengths and weaknesses of different corners. So, if they want to be a team that's playing a lot more zone coverage, Chris Johnson from San Diego State is somebody that I like in that role. If they want to play a little bit more man coverage stuff, Colton Hood from Tennessee is somebody that could fit there. You get a little bit later in the draft, and you get guys like Davison Igminosin from Ohio State, Ephesians Prysock from Washington, Dalen Everett from Georgia as well. These players who have those long frames to be able to really get up in wide receivers, get their hands on on him early and play press coverage very confidently. Then, of course, you've got guys who are better in man or better in zone, when you get to those later rounds. I think that Keith Abney, the second from Arizona State's a great option there. Hezekiah Massis from Cal. These are guys who, man, when you give them space and you allow them to read the quarterback's eyes, they're fantastic. They really know how to cut those routes, create those turnovers, and passes defended. So to me, corner feels like it's one of those areas where you could go with the second round, but I kind of look at this as the value might be there third and fourth round for them to make those depth additions.
Okay, in addition to corner, no doubt that the Raiders need offensive line, wide receiver, a lot of different ways that they could go there in round 2 or round 3. Give me some other names, some other directions that you think when you're doing your mock drafts. You said you've landed on a couple tackles, but where do you think they could go there at number 36 especially?
Yeah, I think that I like those defensive tackle names that I mentioned in Caden McDonald and Christian Miller. Those guys are feel-good type of players. You add them in, and I feel like you've got a good sense of confidence that they're going to be able to really help out the free agent additions and the rest of that team along the way. I like some of the corners that I mentioned, Colton Hood, Chris Johnson, those are some options there. But if you go to some other positions, safety, for example, if Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is there for you, I don't know if he will be. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, but if he's there at the safety position, you feel pretty good about that. AJ Halsey, the safety from LSU, much more likely that he's there at the beginning of the second round. And this is a player who I think that's where his range starts, especially if you want to give him the freedom to patrol that middle of the field. His nickname's Mr. Give Me That because of all the interceptions that he got over the middle of the field, baiting those quarterbacks' eyes. And so you have somebody who really can give you some turnovers there. And then I mentioned a couple of the edge rushers as well. Really just depends on, hey, where do we feel like we can build the best draft strategy? We're going to get the quarterback at the top, and then, wide receiver, safety, edge rusher, defensive line. Where can we see, all right, where's the value here? Where are these guys going to come off the board? Are there specific traits that we're really trying to hone in on? That's, I think, the question that John Spytek's going to answer, but there's a lot of different names and a lot of different ways they can do this in a successful manner.
One of the greatest Raiders of all time, Max Crosby, was a 4th-round pick, right? And the Raiders have 3 picks in the 4th round. That's a real opportunity to build some depth. Maybe you find some gems like a Max Crosby. What position group do you think starts to kind of flesh out where you're not getting the true day one starters, but you really are getting some quality and some value in the 4th round?
I think the corner and edge rusher for this team feels like those positions. I think you're going to hit at least one of them with those multiple 4th-round picks that they have. Again, like I said at the top, once you get into day 3, it's a lot more specialized players, right? It's not guys who you go, okay, this is a 3-down player. If they were a 3-down player, they probably weren't getting picked in the 4th round. All due respect to Max Crosby, who very clearly outplayed that 4th-round selection. But you get to some of those specific pass rushers, a Mason Rieger from Wisconsin, a Max Llewellyn from Iowa, right? These guys who, all right, they're a little bit slender. They're not going to be the best against the run for you, but they've got a deep pass rush bag, and they know how to get after the quarterback. If you want to fortify the offensive line, I think the offensive line, you're going to have some options there as well. Billy Strout, the offensive guard from Notre Dame. I look at Trey Zune, the offensive tackle at Texas A&M, who I think could play center and guard at the NFL level. You start thinking about those players. And then wide receiver, Malachi Lawrence, Ted Hurst, guys like that who could be available for you in the 3rd and even 4th round. You start maybe thinking about wide receiver additions as well. I know it's not the most pressing need on this team, but with multiple 4th-round picks, those are some names that you can kind of think about in that regard. If you go back to the defensive line, I think a guy like Tim Keenan, hey, if you want a nose tackle type, somebody who's just going to clog things up for you in the middle, Tim Keenan from Alabama, he's streamlined in that he's probably not going to give you much as a pass rusher, but he'll be a rock for you in the middle of your defense. And so if you want to play more odd front stuff, have that 0-and-1 technique nose tackle, he's somebody who you can keep your eye on as well.
Well, I appreciate you breaking it down for us. I feel like I have 10 million more questions that I want to ask you, Trevor, but I know you got to get back to your draft coverage. We thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you on NFL Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Anytime.
All right, coming up next, what makes Fernando Mendoza the bona fide #1 overall pick if the Raiders select him? Hall of Famer Kurt Warner chimes in. He joins the show next. Welcome back to Raiders Draft Special. Quarterback is the #1 position every team needs, and there's so much speculation that is where the Raiders will go, #1 overall. But is Fernando Mendoza the guy? Well, let's ask a guy that's done it, the Hall of Famer, Kurt Warner. He joins us now, NFL Network draft analyst. But I'll tell you, it's funny to be talking to you about being a Hall of Famer, about the draft. You weren't drafted. You have the greatest story of all time. So you don't remember this time of year. But, man, what do you think these guys are going through, especially somebody like Fernando?
Yeah, with most of these guys right now, it's really just looking forward to the opportunity. Obviously, cool if Fernando goes #1. I think every young man dreamed of, getting into this position and having their name called #1 overall. But the biggest thing now is these guys just want to prove that they belong at the NFL level, that they can be a starter, that, maybe one day they can have their own gold jacket. But that's what it's about right now, is where am I going? Now, obviously, with the Raiders and Fernando, not a lot of speculation there. We think that's going to happen. But when you talk about the next group of guys, they're just sitting there going, okay, I just want to hear my name called. I want to get into camp, and I want to get going to prove to people that I belong here in the NFL.
I love that behind you, you have the Sports Illustrated cover that says, "Who is this guy?" I think we know who you are now, but we're still learning Fernando Mendoza. You break down quarterbacks over on Quarterback Confidential. If you guys haven't seen that, check it out. He does a great job. So tell me, what does Fernando do well, and what does he need to improve on?
Here's the fun thing, Amber, is that Fernando actually came to my house to train a couple of years ago. As he was just becoming the starter at Cal. And so I got a chance to know him then, the person of Fernando Mendoza, the student, always asking questions, always wanting to learn, wanting to be the best at his craft. So it's been fun to watch him ascend to this point. When you talk about who he is as a player, the #1 thing that I always look at with quarterbacks is their ability to be accurate. And for guys that are often a little bit taller and longer, that can be a challenge. When it comes to Fernando Mendoza, I love his technique. I love his accuracy. He's very compact deliverer of the football. And you saw that on the football field, especially last year at Indiana, is just tremendous accuracy no matter what the throw is. His ability to get the ball out of his hands. Now, some of this, may have been about the system and the way that they played, but there were a lot of what I call pick and stick throws, where it's like, I know where I want to go with the football, get the ball in your hands and get the ball out. Those were things that he was so good at. When he knew exactly where he wanted to go with the football, you were going to get good timing. The ball was going to come out quickly, and it was going to be accurate time and time again. So I think those are the two things that if the Raiders make him the #1 pick, that you start with and that you build off of.
How do you think he fits into Clint Kubiak's scheme? I mean, we saw the scheme win the Super Bowl.
I mean, when you talk about scheme, there's always a combination, is that you definitely want to, stay true to things that you believe in and things that you believe the NFL or your team can be successful at and can take you to the highest level, like we saw last year with Seattle. And you also want to figure out who your quarterback is and how we adjust things to fit our quarterback. The bottom line is you've got to just be able to play the game of football however you have to play it. And I think that's the thing that I see more and more, through the NFL. And, it goes in its cycles, and we've got the most athletic quarterbacks we've ever seen. But you're seeing a transition back to maybe more of like when I played, a lot more under center stuff, a lot more play action or naked bootlegs to try to help, supplement the run game or complement the run game in a different way. All of this shotgun stuff and everything going sideways, has disappeared a little bit with a number of different, organizations or offenses in the league, and they're going back to more conventional football. And so that's what we saw with Clint Kubiak, and we saw with Sam Darnold last year, a lot of under center play action, naked bootleg type stuff. Things that Fernando didn't necessarily do a lot in college, but I believe things you have to do at the NFL level. And so that to me is the process. Is I know we want every one of these guys to be a finished product, especially if they're the #1 overall pick. But to me, it's being able to figure out what he can do now, what he's really good at now, what we want to do in our system, and then continue to work together to make sure Fernando's good at all the things he needs to be good at, and the system can fit where Fernando can separate himself, and prove that there's a reason he's the number one pick. And those special traits that he has, you have to be able to accentuate those within your offense.
You know what is different than when you were playing was these number 1 or top 10 picks playing right away. What is your philosophy? Are you more of a, you know what, throw them out there week 1? We've seen Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams and Drake May, I think, was week 3 or 4 by the time he got in. Or do you say it's better to sit and learn, especially with Kirk Cousins here?
I'm a guy that believes you play a guy when he's ready to play. And none of us really know, that are sitting on the outside know exactly what that means. But we've seen, we've seen both sides of it. We've seen guys that get thrown in, the Jaden Daniels and the CJ Strouds and those guys in their first year, and they play at a top 10 level, and they can handle everything that they have to handle. We've seen other guys like Justin Fields and individuals like that, maybe even a Sam Darnold, thrown in, and they weren't quite ready for everything that went into it. And the league can swallow you up very quickly, and not only swallow you up, but it can stop you or stymie your growth as a player. When you're thrown in too early and you're told, hey, not only do you need to survive, but you need to try to save our organization as well. Here's the ball, go do it. You don't get a chance to sit back and learn the position. You don't get a chance to grow. You don't get a chance to take your lumps the way that you normally would want to take your lumps, knowing, hey, I don't have to win right now. I can take 2 or 3 years to grow into the position. We just don't have that anymore because we have no patience with coaches. We have no patience with players anymore. And so when you're thrown in, you are expected to win and play at a high level right now. So to me, you have to assess your situation. If you know this is your guy for the next 10, 12, 15 years, you don't have to play him tomorrow. You need to play him when he's ready, where you can give him and your team the best chance to be successful and him to step into that role of being the number 1 overall pick. And so different players are different. Just because you have Kirk Cousins there doesn't mean to me you sit Fernando Mendoza, but it gives you the luxury if you say, okay, he's good in these areas, but he's not quite where we want him to be, where we feel he can protect himself. He can give us the best chance to win. So we have the luxury of sitting back and letting him get there. And that could be 4 or 5 games in. That could be half the season. That could be an entire season. But I am a true believer that if you want that guy to become your guy, that you need to wait until you feel he is ready to succeed at the level you need him to succeed before you play him. I'm not a guy that just says, hey, number 1 pick, you got to throw him in there. I don't feel that way, but there are guys that I do think, yet they show up and you go, oh, this guy's ready to do it. He can handle it. Let's put him in week 1. Even though he may, go through some growing pains, he's ready to be able to handle the things that go with that.
And that's why it's great to have Kirk Cousins there, right? There's options. And you know what it's like to be on both sides. You know what it's like to be Kirk. I mean, I remember you were, with the Giants when Eli came in. How do you think that plays out from Kirk's standpoint? Because, he's going to compete and he knows how to start.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all you ever wanted in any situation that you were in is you always felt like, okay, we're at the highest level. Let the best player play. And, so when you get into a situation like that, it was never a situation for me where I thought, oh, I'm not going to share any of my secrets with Eli or with Matt Leinart. I'm going to protect all the stuff over here because I don't want them to know what I know, because then, they'll become the starter. I always was able to take the approach that it's like, hey, I want to share everything I possibly can with these young guys. I want them to grow to become the best version of themselves. And then I'm going to beat them out anyways. So I'm going to compete, and I want them to have all the tools to compete against me and to be great. And if they're better than me, they belong in the lineup. If I'm better than them, I belong in the lineup. But I think Kirk is going to be a great mentor for Fernando Mendoza. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be willing to share anything and everything. And Fernando that I know was a sponge in terms of learning things. I think that is going to be a great mesh in the building. No matter who starts early in the season, I think it's going to work really, really well.
When a rookie quarterback does go out there, what is the biggest challenge in that first game usually? Do you have a memory of your first, even though you had played a ton of arena ball, so you had a little bit of a hybrid there, but where you said, we're not in Iowa anymore. This is different.
I think the biggest thing is letting the game come to you. And that's the hardest thing. And really, no matter what situation you're in, for me, a guy that, had been a journeyman, and I knew I wasn't going to get many opportunities. So, it would have been easy for me to go, oh gosh, I got to go make a splash right away. And I got to show people that I belong. If you're a Fernando Mendoza and you're the #1 overall pick, right? That comes with a certain level of expectation. So when you're thrown in there, do you go and try to play above yourself? Try to make every throw, try to prove to everybody that they made the right decision with the #1 overall pick, or do you allow the game to come to you? And that, to me, I think is the most important thing, is to be able to manage those expectations and just play the game that's in front of you and not try to do too much, not try to be too much or to prove too much too early. Let the game come to you, be who you are at that point, and allow that to be good enough as you grow into the player that you'll be 4, 5, 10 years down the road.
We also have to remember, Kurt, this is a new system for everybody, right? New head coach, new offensive coordinator, could be a new rookie quarterback. You got a new center and Tyler Lindenbaum, who's an all-pro, so that's nice to have him there. But in the outside zone run blocking scheme, which we're expecting to see, that requires the line to shift in unison. Does that take a little bit longer to develop because the line does have to gel? And how does that affect a possible rookie quarterback?
I don't know if it affects the quarterback much. I mean, most of these schemes, whether it's, your heavy run scheme or not, we've all run every kind of run play over the years. I played in some, more zone type systems. I played in some more man type systems, but, I had taken, snaps from under center, and I had run the footwork for every single run play, probably in the history of football. And so that doesn't affect a whole bunch from a quarterback standpoint. What can affect a quarterback is if they do want to play more under center. And it's not just, being able to take a snap from under center, but, turning your back to the defense and the ability to be able to snap your head and recognize and know what you're looking at and make those quick decisions. Those are things that can definitely be different than, majority playing in the shotgun and now under center, and what you're doing with a lot of play action, or, the hard play actions off the stretch, like you're talking about, where it's a lot of movement by the quarterback and being able to recognize what's going on. So that can surely be a transition if you're not used to playing in more of an under center play action type system. But again, I'm a firm believer that if you're going to play at the NFL level, you got to figure out how to do it all. Yep. You got to be able to know how to play under center. You got to be able to know how to play in shotgun. You got to be able to have flexibility in your game. If you're limited in certain capacities, obviously your offense is going to be limited, but your potential as being a great player is also going to be limited. And so, that'll probably be a bit of a challenge. I don't really know the full background of Fernando. I know obviously what he did last year at Indiana, but I do believe that they're going to ask him to be under center and be able to function in that capacity. Again, when you talk about Kirk Cousins, something he's done a lot in his career, he's been really, really good at. And so something that I think he's going to be able to be a useful tool for Fernando as well. How do you do this? Where do you keep your eyes? Are there any cheats you have before the ball is snapped? How can I do those things better? Because I don't have a lot of practice with being under center and play action game.
The greatest quarterbacks of all time do learn that mental part of the game, right? They learn how to do everything well. They're students of the game. You did that. Look at Tom Brady, the minority owner over here. He was a 6th-round draft pick, one of the best mental quarterbacks ever to play. With Tom Brady here and a rookie possibly coming here, what could his mentorship look like? Like, how would you approach that? You know, you're in an organization, you're a Hall of Famer, you know, he's a future Hall of Famer. You know, how do you play that?
For me, if I know I'm the number one pick, now it might be harder if you're an undrafted free agent quarterback. You know, it's like, okay, you know, do I have the ability to go up to Tom Brady and ask him to sit down with me? With me being the number one overall pick, knowing he's the minority owner of the team and he wants this team to be successful, and everything, you know, we know about Tom is he is fully invested in the things that he does. Man, when I get drafted, that is one of the first things I'm doing. I'm putting him on speed dial and I'm saying, Tom, I know you have a whole bunch of other things that you're doing. I don't know what the dynamic is because you're calling games, but when you are in the building, I would love to set aside a time every week to jump on a Zoom call and you to teach me how to play the game. Share with me the things that you had, the tools that you used to be successful. Not that they'll all be able to be taken by Fernando and used. You know, he may have to prepare and play the game a little bit differently. But to me, if I have that access in the building and I know I'm in that position that Fernando Mendoza would be in, I would be picking Tom's brain every chance I got to be able to, hope that some of that stuff just kind of slid off to me, help me maybe how to prepare, right? The little things like that. How do you watch film? What did you look for? What helped you to be able to play the game before? Like all of those things would be invaluable. And I think Fernando Mendoza should tap into that as soon and as much as he possibly can.
And you know what Tom Brady's answer will be? Yes.
Yes,
sure.
Exactly.
Whatever you need, you can guarantee that. He is happy to share that information, especially with his own quarterback. Hey, Kurt, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to watch you over on NFL Network's coverage of the draft. Your analysis along with Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis, what a cast, Rich Eisen over there. So have so much fun in Pittsburgh, and we'll see you after the number one pick.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Amber.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Still to come, NFL Network's Charles Davis joins the show. He tells us, could the Raiders use their picks to trade up? That's next. The 2026 Raiders Draft Special is brought to you by your Southern Nevada Ford dealers. Welcome back. As all eyes continue to be on the Raiders, who will they select number one overall coming up on Thursday night. Plenty of draft analysts giving their opinions. And one of my favorites, of course, is NFL Media's Charles Davis. You can catch Charles talking draft all week long over on NFL Network. Hi, Charles. It's good to see you.
Always great to see you, Amber. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Hey, look, it's no secret. Everybody believes that the Raiders could take Fernando Mendoza. I'm sure that's the first time you've heard that. We know this guy is a winner, right? Heisman Trophy winner, national championship winner. What do you think, though, will be the number one contributing factor to his success early in the NFL?
Who and what is around him, Amber? I mean, it's going to take, this is the old, it takes a village, right? Well, quarterbacks have success when other people are good around them. And then as successful as they are at playing their position, they can elevate those people as well when that time comes. Look, when you watch Fernando Mendoza play, you go all the way back to his career. Cal, had his share of struggles there, right? Gets to Indiana and becomes a polished project, right? All the struggles that came before him, now they put it together, they buff it. He works like crazy at it. He ascends. Indiana ascends, the whole thing. He was part of a great team, and he helped raise their level with his own play. Well, early on with the Raiders, rookie quarterbacks, as a general rule, you're not raising anyone's play right out of the gate. You need that help to get you comfortable, get you going, get things happening. And then as time goes on, you raise that level. I was fortunate enough to call a number of the Raiders games last year because anytime I call a ball game, I'm fortunate, right, Amber? We're part of this thing, having fun doing it, right? But they weren't fun to watch. It wasn't great to watch. They weren't a good football team for so many different reasons. If that team is who Fernando Mendoza is quarterbacking, he's going to struggle like crazy. He's going to struggle mightily. John Spytek, Tom Brady, the rest of the front office, they're working like crazy to make it a better roster. And as they continue to do so, so much the better for Fernando Mendoza.
I like what you said, bringing up going back early in his college days. You talk about Cal. What do we learn about his resilience and his makeup if we look at his college history?
Yeah, we learn a lot, and I'm glad you brought that up, Amber, because it's obviously something you've observed along the way too. These quarterbacks that are just, let's say, Amber, we're watching a ball game, you and I, we're doing a game together, right? We're going to walk out impressed if the quarterback that day went 28 of 32, 4 touchdowns, no picks, had a monster day. We're like, wow, that's a big day, right? But how many times have you worked a game, done something, and you've been just a touch more impressed when he went into the last drive of the game, having thrown 2 picks, 17 of 34 throwing the football that day, not a lot of success, a lot of drives that have been empty. But on that last drive, they pull it together, find a way, get what they need, whether it's the game-winning field goal, the touchdown, puts his team in a position. Those are the quarterbacks you're looking for, because they're going to have plenty of those 28 of 32 days if they're talented. We know that. But the quarterbacks that have their busts in Canton, the quarterbacks that go to the Pro Bowl consistently, talking about first ballot Pro Bowl, not the 8th selection after a lot of injuries. Talk about those guys who are picked for that, potential all-pro players. They find ways when they've had a tough ball game, when things haven't been great, and they stick with it. That is what I believe your point is about Fernando Mendoza, because let's face it, Amber, in the last X number of years, how many of these quarterbacks have we seen rise to the level of Mendoza that previously we weren't quite sure about? Joe Burrow, going into his last year at LSU, did not have a first-round grade. Okay? Zach Wilson, I know it's been rough in the NFL, but he rose to number 2 in the draft. Again, going into his last year, not a lot of people had a first-round grade on him. You see where I'm going? Mm-hmm. Mendoza going into last year. I don't know how many people said, this guy's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Cam Ward last season. That's part of that, what you talk about, that resilience, that battling through, continuing to find a way to get better. Situation gets better, and sometimes it just fits perfectly. Yes, Fernando Mendoza, Indiana, Kurt Signetti, that crew. Boy, that fit perfectly.
It was the perfect storm, that's for sure. The Raiders do have 10 total picks. People forget they have 9 others other than the number 1 overall pick.
They do? Oh, my God. I thought it was over after that. I thought
we were all going to go home. Yeah, we have dinner plans, or we're going home. Do you think, knowing John Spytek, and we haven't seen much of him as a GM, he's only been a little over a year as a GM, but do you think that you could see him packaging some of those and moving back into the first round?
Possibly, because these young GMs, when I call them young GMs, I'm talking about experience-wise. We've seen them be more aggressive, Amber, haven't we, over the last 5 to 7 years than maybe ever before? Because I think there was a lot of, I'll put it to you this way. In my youth, when you walked into a locker room, let's say you were a sophomore in high school and you walked in, you had to pay deference to those seniors, didn't you?
Yep.
Right? You had to, hey, okay, let me find my way. Let me not be heard. When you get to college, you're a freshman. Freshmen are to be seen, not heard, and you move on. Nowadays, no one's quiet like that. These kids have been on national TV since they were 12. They've gone to camps. They've gone to stuff. They just walk right in and just blast away. Well, John Spytek is in that group now of these general managers who have busted their you-know-whats to get this opportunity. They're not waiting their turn, quote unquote. They're not wasting time. They're getting right to it. I still remember Joe Douglas, no longer the GM of the Jets. But you remember that year, Amber, when he packaged together everything and ended up with 3 first-round picks?
Yes, I did. Sauce Gardner was one of them.
First round. Mm-hmm. Sauce Gardner was one. Jermaine Johnson. Elijah Vera Tucker. Terrific draft. Didn't work out for the Jets the way they wanted, but you couldn't fault what he did. Couldn't fault the aggressiveness. Monty Ossenfort's first year at Arizona as a GM. Nick Caserio and his time with the Texans. Look at how they just get right to it. John Spytek has worked for this opportunity. He has busted it. He's got as good a football mind as there is out there. He's going to, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he were to do something similar. But he's also going to do something that makes sense. He's not going to just do it so he wins the press conference. He's going to do it because this makes sense for the Raiders.
By the way, congratulations to Joe Douglas's son, Tommy, just signed to play for the Florida Gators. So good things for the Douglas family. Yes, he did.
Congratulations to him, except for when he has to go to Knoxville or the Volunteers show up in Gainesville.
We know how you feel.
Because we laid it on the Gators last year. I think 31 zip. So hopefully Tommy can help the Gators that way. Congratulations to him. But just know, We got something waiting for you in Knoxville, young man.
I
But
love
anyway.
it. I love it. You can't take you out of that. You can't, no matter what we do. Look, I'm trying to think of players or needs that the Raiders would have that would make them go back up into the first round, right? You have to really be in love with someone. You have to think that they're sliding somewhat. And I was just thinking of somebody that, is a Raider at heart, and that's Mekhi Lemon. I know you scout all these guys. He loves the Raiders. The USC wideout. Yep. We have no idea what Spytek thinks of him. We don't know if he likes him or not. They need a true number one receiver, that is for sure. Could you see the Raiders trading up to get a player like that at a position of need? I mean, there's also Omar Cooper Jr., but he probably is in the later in the first or even early second.
Yeah, and it's interesting about those receivers because you're right. We have no idea what these teams truly think. We're doing our own speculation and following the tea leaves and listening and doing our own evaluation. But let's take Mekhi Lemon, for example, because consensus feels like, Amber, you better get there before the Rams do at 13. Right. If you want Mekhi Lemon, it certainly feels like if he's sitting there, that's almost central casting for what Sean McVay wants to do and what the Rams have in terms of designs for this season, which is to host another Super Bowl back at SoFi. That's how it appears. We don't know if that's exactly what Les Snead and crew are thinking, but boy, that sure would be a nice match there, wouldn't it? Because Mekhi Lemon, in a lot of ways, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Mm-hmm. All right. That's who he is. By what we evaluate, we'll see where it goes. If we're talking about Omar Cooper, with his toughness, his ability to elevate his game in big moments, the catch of the year last year in college football, blocks in the run game, all those things that you're looking for. I don't know that you're going back up to get. I don't know, as you said, what John Spytek's going to do, but Brock Bowers is your number one receiver right now. And that's a good thing in a lot of ways, but he's your tight end. Who's your number one receiver on the perimeter that a quarterback can rely on, go to? A lot of times for a young quarterback, the tight end and the slot receiver are their best targets. Why? Because a lot of those throws take place in their sight lines a lot easier. Much, much more simple for them to do. So Mekhi Lemon fits a slot receiver. Omar Cooper can go in there and do that. Can they find someone like that? What if it's a KC Concepcion and you're down into the 20s? And maybe you want to give your quarterback a dynamic playmaker that way. Maybe John Spytek might have designs on doing something like that. So your point is well taken. But this doesn't feel like a draft, Amber, where there's going to be a ton of movement to get that player. Mm-hmm. Because if you miss on that guy or you don't get him, there's a similar type player coming down the pipe.
That's true. Deep wideouts.
We're going all the way up, and I got to have him. Because if I don't get him, I'm going to get something similar, I think, later. And I don't want to make it too simplistic. Like the guy you don't get at 15, you can get at 25, you can get at 35, 45. But I think it kind of feels that way, kind of tilts that way.
Man, wouldn't that be interesting, going back to what you said, if the Raiders traded up to number 13 and took the Rams pick? And you know what? That's one ahead of the Ravens, and something seems poetic about that, but we're not going to go there. All right.
Can't imagine what that would be. I have no idea. I mean, I've just been, grinding for the draft and watching March Madness and the Masters. Other than that, I got nothing.
You got nothing going on. All right. Hey, we haven't talked a lot about the defense. Rob Leonard is expected to run, it's going to be more complicated, but a 3-4 base, so to speak. They address the linebacker position in free agency. Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker. They have Max. They have Kuntz. They have pass rushers galore. Haven't heard much about nose tackle. Is this an area, it's so important in a 3-4 base. Is this an area, do you think, the Raiders could address in the draft, or they stand pat with like Adam Butler? How deep is that position in the draft?
I think it's pretty deep, Amber. I think there are plenty of players there. Like this defensive tackle crew, I think is plentiful, but it's not a defensive tackle crew that in college football identified themselves as interior pass rushers. So, in the NFL, let's use the University of Texas a few years ago, all right? Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy playing next to each other. I mean, the idea that you're going to run the football, good luck to you, right? Okay. Sweat creates rubble by himself as a dominant zero-type technique player, and Murphy was more of the up-the-field type of a guy. Sweat walked away with all the honors, right? All the big trophies, you name it. The guy the NFL wanted was Murphy. And boy, did that pay off for Seattle. He's an up record, get to the quarterback, the whole deal. Sweat will take care of things at the line of scrimmage. The way we play ball now, you need the guy who gets upfield. This is a draft where those defensive tackles, as we see it right now, of course, they can develop. Many of them are line of scrimmage guys, as I would define them, right? So if you sit there, right, Amber, a Dominique Orange out of Iowa State fits the bill perfectly for what you're looking for, because he's going to control things right there. He's going to be a big defensive tackle, eat up space, take on blocks, make sure that other people get a chance to make plays. Right now, I'm not counting on him getting me a lot of upfield pressure and sacks. That's just not what he does consistently. Let's see if he can elevate that in his game. And he's just one example. We're going to see a number of those big guys that are involved in this. And even at the top, all right, let's just go to the top. However you rank them, right? Is it Kayvon McDonald, right? Is it Peter Woods from Clemson? Is it Lee Hunter from Texas Tech? Is it Caleb Banks from Florida? Any of those guys are really good players. I don't expect the first defensive tackle to come up for it until we get to the 20s, Amber.
Wow.
Because none of them have shown so far that they're that inside pressure wreck people like Byron Murphy did with Seattle last year.
It is a new model, though, and it's so important in a 3-4 base, especially what the Raiders are trying to do.
Got to have that zero technique that holds it down.
Yep. One spot, let's move over to the offensive line. In my opinion, based on what they did in the offseason, Tyler Lindenbaum's there, Colton Miller's supposed to be back. It seems like JPJ might be more natural as a guard, but they still need, I think they're one lineman away from really transforming that line, and they need a starter in the draft, in my opinion. What are some of the names to look out for that maybe are there at number 36 that could be a day one starter on the offensive line and have an impact on the Raiders?
Are we thinking right tackle, or are we thinking
I'm thinking
more
a tackle and a swing tackle because, Colton, if he goes down again, you need a swing tackle.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because you have a number of these tackles that have first round mention, and I don't think all of them are going to go in the first round. So if you're talking about 36, that guy could be there. That means to me a Blake Miller from Clemson, right tackle, who's 54 starts, 3,000 snaps. That means Caleb Lomu from Utah, who was the left tackle opposite Spencer Fano, who I expect to be gone at this point. But Lomu, I think, will be in that conversation. How do we feel about Max Ionichor, who really came on in the process from Arizona State? Does he sneak into the first round, or does he go? Caden Proctor, who is just a mammoth human being, right? And we thought for sure was a lock first rounder. If he doesn't go to a team that just flat out likes him, does he slide into the second round and become that player that you're going to have to look at? So there are a good number of guys who are going to be around. And then we start getting into that next tier and that next level of player. But Amber, bunch of those offensive linemen that are around, that are hanging there, and you're saying, hey, I think I can get some play out of them. And maybe, just possibly, you find exactly what you're looking for. Another starter right tackle and a swing guy that you can get. But even out of that group, all of them have first round discussion. Doesn't mean they're all going to make it that far.
Charles Davis, I could talk to you forever. Just a wealth of draft information. But anybody that wants to hear Charles, tune into NFL Network. You're going to be on all week long with your analysis. I can't wait to watch. Thanks for being here, old friend. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Amber. Always great to see you, and continued success to you. And I think the Raiders are going to have a big draft.
We're excited. It's a good time to be a part of the Raiders. Thanks a lot, Charles.
Take care now.
Coming up next on the Raiders Draft Special, it is Brandon Yeargan, the Director of College Scouting for the Raiders. We ask him, what are your non-negotiables when drafting a player? Next. A reminder to head over to Raiders.com/draft for all the latest info on the Raiders picks, and you can check out 7-round mock drafts from Levi Edwards, Paul Gutierrez, and Rhett Lewis. And speaking of Rhett Lewis, he and Bucky Brooks had the chance to sit down with Raiders Director of College Scouting, Brandon Yeargan.
Well, Brandon, pleasure to have you on here, the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Appreciate you making some time here for us amidst a busy time for you guys. But that's the thing here that I want to get into a little bit with you. I think so many of us think about the draft in the landscape of, all right, once the Super Bowl is over, once the season is over, now it's draft time. But it's draft time literally for you year round, right, as the Director of College Scouting. So maybe take us through that process for you as it now kind of reaches, culmination here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it definitely starts, probably the Monday after the draft. In prior regimes, we would even the scouts would start on next year's class even earlier. But here, I mean, our guys are going to get rolling next Monday after the draft. So there's really not a lot of time for that transition because we put a lot of work into the summer scouting process and kind of identifying things before we get into the fall.
You know, Brandon, what's interesting in the role that you play and having kind of come up in the business, how much has the scouting business changed since you just got in as an area scout?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. Gosh, my first year was 2013. The technology piece has changed a ton. There's no doubt about that. Just the access to information, the quick access to film, that's probably one of the biggest changes for the area scout lifestyle because, as you know, Bucky, when you would go into the school, that was when you were watching all your tape, and you really wouldn't have that much access at home or in the office. Now you get it pretty much immediately on the iPad, whether it's a week later or 2 weeks at the worst. But, I mean, there was a makeup pro day yesterday that we already have today. So that's the biggest change. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but the transfer stuff has definitely been a big change since when I started 2013.
Yeah, let's jump in right there. You mentioned it. So many of these guys that you're gonna end up filling out a draft card for once we get the draft started will have started their careers somewhere different than where they finished. Do you guys look at that as a positive in some cases, being exposed to maybe different styles, different schemes, or is it more of like a case by case basis?
Yeah, you can look at it that way. It can be a positive because you're getting different viewpoints on the player, seeing them against different levels of competition, especially for the guys that are transferring up. That's obviously a better exposure for those guys. The guys who are transferring from maybe an odd front to an even front, seeing them play a different style or different offense, or maybe he's an outside receiver that's now playing inside. There's some value in that. And then there's a lot of value in getting different information from a previous place, from a new place, how they've grown, how they've developed, where they've changed, because you're going to do the work on both places. If the player's of significance, you're going to ask where he was coming from because they knew the player when he was 17, 16, 18 years old versus the new school who's inheriting him at 20 or 21. And you guys know those are some formative years where guys develop and change a lot.
I mean, we always talk about no stone left unturned in the draft process and gathering information, and now NIL, just more data points, more ways to get information about who these guys are and who these players are. And kind of in that light now, Brandon, when you're assessing players and scouting, are there non-negotiables? Does it differ by position? But whether it's on the field or off the field, are there things that a Raider has to have?
Yeah, great question. The non-negotiables for us are really a level of mental and physical toughness and a passion for the game. I would say those are the three things that are non-negotiable and that every player that we're going to bring in needs to have those qualities because it's going to get hard for them. Even as a rookie, it's going to be really hard. Even in year 3 or 4, it's still going to be hard, and you have to reprove yourself every year because it doesn't carry over. So guys that are mentally tough, physically tough, and then a passion for the game, because it's not going to be perfect for them all the time. They're going to have to sacrifice something for the team. And guys who are about the right makeup and love football and have a passion for it and are competitive, those are the guys that have success. Intelligence is also another component. Based on the position you're playing, there's some, relativity there with certain positions needing a higher level of intelligence. And then some positions, it's just a limiting factor. But I would say those three things are really core values for us.
And Bucky, if I could just double down here for a second, because I feel like it relates a little bit, maybe on the flip side. I know that when we talk about, things you want for certain positions, there can be outliers, right? Outlier traits. I think in the media community about with the draft, we talk about the shorter arms. We talk about maybe guys with a bunch of experience or limited starts, or guys that are 24, 25 years old compared to maybe the more normal age range. How do you guys deal with outlier traits as you try to stack things up player by player?
Sure. I think you still evaluate the tape for what it is, what the player's role is, what he does well, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, that kind of thing. How would we use the player if he was in our system? And then once you get more information about some of those outliers, once you get confirmed measurables or in the case you mentioned with the lack of production or starts, I think it's really just like an alert for us or a red flag, and it might cause us to do a little more work on the player.
Coming up, what the NFL's top analysts are saying about the Raiders. The 2026 Raiders Draft Special is brought to you by your Southern Nevada Ford dealers. The Raiders are clearly committed to winning the offseason, and some would say they already have. The structure and the talent has already been massively upgraded. The draft will be one of the most exciting in Raiders history. But after that, just win, baby. Join us for our live coverage on Thursday and Friday, streaming on Raiders platforms and Raider Nation Radio from 1 to 4 p.m. Pacific. Have a great draft week, everyone. We'll see you then.